I did get a chance to actually play in a game.
Yes.
Doesn't happen very often as a DM. I play the games that I play, but I don't play in them.
You're the most forever GM I've ever met.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to every edition of the Tabletop RPG Talk Show. I'm John.
I'm Jesse.
This is part 2 of our broadcasting live from MepaCon here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. On our Loot the Body segment today, we're going to be taking a look at Swords and Chaos, a new RPG that borrows from Castles and Crusades and adds a little bit more OSR spice.
In today's random encounter, we have an interview with the Greyhawk Grognard himself. And
I can't believe we scored that interview.
He's going to be talking about his systems and his upcoming book, The Sword of Wuxia.
Yeah, very cool. And of course, we'll have our morale check where we'll take a look at the news of the time. But first, Jesse, what's new?
Well, so this is the last day of MepaCon. I did get a chance to actually play in a game.
Yes.
Doesn't happen very often as a DM. I play the games that I play, but I don't play in them.
You're the most forever GM I've ever met.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
But I like being a player character sometimes too. So I played Dungeon Crawl Classics. I played in Sirius's The Caves of Refuge that we talked about in our interview with him. He actually ran that, and his next part, the Lost Tower,
right?
That just got kickstarted. Super fun. We had a full table of 8 people, full dungeon crawl stuff. It was a 0 level funnel. My main character, the one, when you make a 0 level funnel, you make 4 characters each. And there's always one character I feel like that you grow attached to.
Sure.
He died first.
Well,
he was his name was Raul. He was a radish farmer, but he had like the best stats of anybody in my party, and he died first in a trap. So that was a little unfortunate, but it was a super good time. We had a really fun time with everybody, and and Sirius is a fantastic GM. He knows what he's doing when it comes to dungeon crawl.
Yeah, great to connect the dots, to meet him in person and get a chance to play the game that just got kickstarted, and awesome.
How about you, John? What's new?
Well, so my MepaCon experience was awesome. 3 wonderful days. I really ended up playing lots of great OSR games. So I played a Dungeon Crawl Classics game. It was Get in the Van, which was a very gonzo experience where the player characters actually find a magical van.
Sure.
So that was
sounds like an 80s movie.
Exactly. Yep. So that was Friday, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and then I ended up playing the next couple days. Played a game of Old School Essentials. Got a chance to play The Winter's Daughter, which is one of the first Dalemwood modules that's out, and it's excellent. I had a great experience with that. And then the surprise of the con for me, I got a chance to play Hyperborea. Which was just fantastic. I think that was my favorite game of the convention, probably because I wasn't anticipating getting a chance to play it. Hyperborea is essentially a first edition Dungeons & Dragons clone that's a much more Conan, sword and sorcery, monsters and magic are rare sort of thing. But remember when we did an episode on Hyperborea, and it has like the most unique classes I've seen. It's got 4 different variants of fighter, 4 different variants of thief, 4 different variants of clerics and magic users. I ended up playing a rune caster, which is like a blood mage.
That sounds kind of spooky.
A little creepy, but it was super fun. And I'm glad I got a chance to play it, because I don't know that it's a game that I'd get a chance to play except at a con.
Seems like a very niche type of game.
Yeah, absolutely. Descending armor class, ladies and gentlemen. It's not for everyone.
All right, it's time for a morale check. In our morale checks, we take a look at news of the times and what's going on in the RPG industry. So this one's pretty big. There's a new D&D movie, if you haven't heard.
Is there?
Official Dungeons & Dragons movie.
Whoa.
I got a chance to see it, and it's fantastic. It's
Is it good?
fantastic. I really hope so. In all the dunking on Wizards of the Coast and sort of modern age D&D that we do, I still love the game. I still love the lore and all the characters and whatnot, and I want it to succeed. And I hope that, you know, with the sort of shift away from superhero movies that we're starting to see, I hope that we see a shift into sci-fi and fantasy and sort of medieval fantasy. And I think Dungeons and Dragons shows the people at the top that have all the money that people are willing to go see and support a D&D high fantasy dragons and swords and magic type of thing, because it was just fantastic. I thought going into it that it was going to be like Guardians of the Galaxy, where sort of every line would be a joke or a reference to something.
Sure.
And it really wasn't. It was a heist movie, like through and through, and it referenced a lot of D&D things that sort of everybody would know. But I felt as a DM, I had like a little bit of an in, like I know how that fight could go.
Yeah.
In like paper and and dice. It was super fun. Not going to give any spoilers, obviously. But if you haven't seen it or haven't had a chance to see it, please do. It was fantastic.
Well, and I think you want, at the end of the day, you want Dungeons and Dragons to succeed, because as it continues to grow, the hobby continues to grow.
Yeah.
And it really does then make space for other creators, right, and other people. So the success of a D&D movie is good for the hobby, I think.
Yeah, and compared to the original, the CGI was like fantastic.
Oh, cool.
It will stand up over time, and the writing was just spot on.
I can't wait to see it. I haven't seen it yet. All right, in other news, BRW Games has a new book coming out called Swords of Wuxia. And BRW Games, that's the Greyhawk Grognard's game company, and we'll be talking to him a little bit later in the episode. But this book is focused on adding Kung Fu to your first edition Dungeons and Dragons game.
And it's just anybody that can learn Kung Fu. You just sort of, I guess, spend your XP points learning that. So you're not restricted to just one race class combo that can learn Kung Fu. Anybody can.
Yeah. So it's going to be open options for every character class. I love BRW Games because the Greyhawk Grognard, Joseph Bloch, when he puts out a book, it's got an orange spine. I'm a little bit of a goblin when it comes to like having things look nice on the shelf and collecting books and stuff. And it's so great to have new orange spine books. So if you play first edition, I'm sure you know who the Greyhawk Grognard is. And if you're curious about first edition, this is a great place to start. And obviously, if you're into Greyhawk, I mean, this is a slam dunk. So check out BRW Games and get ready for Swords of Wuxia coming to DriveThruRPG as a print on demand.
Friend of the show, Trevor Smith, who back in, I think, November, December, somewhere around there, on DriveThruRPG put out The Spooky Manor, which was a one-shot designed to sort of give you a fright for your party, has released another PDF on DriveThruRPG called The Treasure of Bloodthorn Island.
Yes.
And for how quick he turns these out, the writing is just fantastic.
I think Trevor Smith is one of the authors and third-party creators that you want to keep your eye on.
Yeah.
If you haven't checked out The Spooky Manor, do it. It's going to be your next Halloween game for sure. And the Treasure of Bloodthorn Island, he's got an affinity for pirates. And so this is a pirate-themed adventure of plundering and exploring an island.
So if you want, we will leave a link in the description down below, and you can check it out there.
Very good. And finally, we want to thank MepaCon for hosting us this weekend. We had a great time. And if you're watching this, MepaCon 44 is over. But MepaCon 45 is coming up. And so October 20th through the 22nd of 2023 here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. You should be marking your calendar and you should be planning to come to MepaCon. It is a fantastic 3-day convention. Lots of different kinds of games, role-playing games, board games, card games, you name it. Saturday, there's an amazing auction. So you can bring your old games and you can essentially, trade them in. And then you can participate in the auction and pick up games. It's basically like a giant nerd swap meet kind of experience. I had a great time, picked up a bunch of actually 4th edition stuff. And what else I picked? And some 3rd edition stuff of Dungeons and Dragons. Sure. People were getting rid of their older editions. You fools! And so I scooped some stuff up. But big thanks to effectively our sponsor for these last couple of episodes, MepaCon. And we had a great time. And you will too. Check out MepaCon, October 20th through the 22nd. This coming fall of 2023, MepaCon 45.
With MepaCon 44 over, the summer of cons is fast approaching.
Ooh.
John, do you have any lined up that you're going to?
So I'm going to be at Origins again, representing every edition, and excited to go back. Had a great time last June, and so coming up this June, I'll be at Origins, and our friends Lurking Fears will be there, running lots of games. I'll be hanging out with those guys, and playing lots of games. Actually, the signups for games are the end of April, so I haven't signed up for anything yet.
Sure. I'm hoping to go to either Origins or Gen Con. I haven't decided which one I want to go to. Will likely be Origins.
Cool.
Just because there's a lot of stuff going on later in the year. But I'm curious to know what you guys have planned for the summer of cons. It's not just those 2 sort of end cap cons. There's tons of smaller cons, local cons going on. So I'd love to hear about that down in the comments, or you can send us a line over at everyeditionrpg@gmail.com. You can also check out our socials over at everyeditionrpg.com, where we have links to YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, all that jazz.
Okay, it's time for a random encounter. Today's random encounter, we have Joseph Bloch from BRW Games with us here today. You probably know him as the Greyhawk Grognard.
Yes, that is I.
I'm a big fan of the channel and of BRW Games in general, so it's great to have you here in person.
Thanks, it's great to be here. Thanks for asking.
Whether you realize it or not, you're actually on my short list of people that I wanted to interview when we were first putting together the idea of starting this channel. Yeah. So it's great to not only be interviewing you, but to be doing it in person.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
This is great.
So, so tell us a little bit about BRW Games. Like, how did it get started? That sort of thing.
Yeah, BRW Games got started because I wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to finish Castle Greyhawk, because way back when Troll Lords still had the rights, Gary Gygax put out the first box set of Castle Zagig. And then he passed away and they lost the rights, and I wanted to see the rest of the castle. So I started writing my own levels on my blog and giving them away, and then I realized that people were interested in it, so I could actually, do them up right and sell them.
Cool.
And the other idea I wanted was, I was always fascinated by those Dragon Magazine articles in the 80s where Gary was talking about the new classes that he wanted to add to the game, and how the different changes that he wanted to make, and that's the game I wanted to play. And then I realized I could have that. And that's how Adventures Dark and Deep started. So it was basically a vehicle for me to just get the stuff that I wanted that nobody else was doing.
That's fantastic. Awesome. And what about the Greyhawk Grognard YouTube channel? How did that get started?
Well, I was always a fan of the World of Greyhawk since it was first published. I had the folio, I had the box set, I got all the things. I just loved it. I thought that it was brief in its descriptions of things, but they were so evocative that you could spin off all kinds of details just from a couple of phrases and words here and there. So I loved the way it was put together, and I've always liked the setting. And I had a blog for a long, long time, I still do, called Greyhawk Grognard, greyhawkgrognard.com. And eventually I noticed that the trend was going away from blogs onto YouTube, and that's pretty much it. It's like, I want to get more people to like Greyhawk as much as I do. So that was where it came from.
Cool. And I've seen you've started to sort of dabble in YouTube Shorts a little bit as well.
Yes, I do. Every Sunday, I do a short adventure hook set in the world of Greyhawk.
Nice.
And it's really hard sometimes to keep it under the 60 seconds.
Yeah. Sure.
Because if you go over any at all, it thinks it's not a short, and it just it's weird. But I just wanted to. When they first rolled out the shorts, I wanted to try something something, and that was the first thing that came to mind that I could do, quickly.
Yeah.
Great.
So, as someone who has never played First Edition or anything back beyond 3.5,
who
mainly plays 5th Edition, why did you choose First Edition? What has sort of kept you there or kept you going back?
Well, I started off with Holmes Basic, the blue box with the red dragon on it.
Sure.
Yep.
And over that summer, then we graduated to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons because you're 11 and you want to go to Advanced. But I really liked the system, and I did go to Second Edition when it came out. But then when they came out with Third, I went back to First. And the thing I love most about it, it's not just nostalgia. I love the fact that it's modular, and it invites tinkering, and it has completely different systems for different things. And because of that, you can change something over here, and it won't hurt what's going on over here.
Sure.
Oh.
So, and I love to tinker. I love to write new rules. I love to write, variations on things. And it's like being back in the 80s. We would take the combat system from Arms Law and Claw Law, and we would take the magic system from over here, and we would take the monsters from over here, and it was still called Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
So and with the more modern rule sets, because they have those unified mechanics, it kind of fights you.
Sure.
To try to do that. It's much more difficult to just kind of interject something completely new that doesn't mesh mechanically with the rest of the system. First, and to a lesser degree, Second, lets you do that. And of course, Basic is in the same boat.
Cool. A question that just occurred to me because of you're talking about how you did move on to Second Edition, but then when Third came out, you kind of went back.
Right.
In hindsight, right, First and Second Edition are pretty close.
Right.
Right. So do you remember, back to 2000, what it was about Third Edition or Wizards of the Coast or whatever that you didn't like, or that sort of turned you off and made you want to go back?
I don't think there was anything specific so much as I felt like they were just kind of gouging me. Why do I need a new edition? I've got two that I like already, and it was less of a studied, principled thing, other than I'm not gonna do this. I don't care.
Right.
You'd already bought two players.
Exactly. More than two.
Well, and I think they. We haven't really talked about this yet on the show, but they really burned themselves in 2003 when they came out with 3.5, because everybody that was worried that they were gouging them, 3 years later you had to get another player's handbook. It's like, come on.
So I am vindicated.
Yes, absolutely. Over and over again. Over and over again. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so on the show here, we have covered, I think we did an episode on Swords of Cthulhu or reviewed it. And that is just a fantastic book. I love that it's for First Edition, it's for AD&D, and it takes that Cthulhu mythos and gives you some options for it. What were you thinking, or what was the inspiration, or what were you trying to accomplish with Swords of Cthulhu? I
have been a Lovecraft fan since I was like 8 years old.
Sure.
And I've read all the stuff, and I just love the ideas and the way he presents it, and the concepts and things. And being a D&D person, you naturally want to take from every source you can possibly find. And since I am such a fan of it, and it does seem to work so well with the D&D mythos. A lot of the things that Lovecraft does, especially on the things that he co-wrote or ghost wrote, were actually much more science fiction-y and much more almost swords and sorcery than you normally think of, like creeping horror and things like that. But there's a lot of other elements in his work that I think mesh really well with the D&D concept. For the cultists, depending on which great old one you worship, you get different spells and different benefits and things like that. And the idea was we wanted to see how it played out with different cultists fighting each other for control of that was the scenario we were running to test them out. So
that was the part I was drawn to, was looking at the new classes and obviously the cultists. And it says, this maybe isn't best for a player character class unless you're an evil party or something like that, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different ways to run, and there's actually a chapter in the book about how to create a campaign using these concepts. And one of the concepts is that the Cthulhu mythos is actually the religion.
Right.
And I think Brian Lumley did a couple of swords and sorcery books around this idea, where there were temples of Hastur and temples of Cthulhu in the streets. And, so in that respect, the cultist becomes the cleric.
Sure.
And then you have the clerics as the servants of the new gods coming to supplant them, and that sets up that tension of like the good deities are actually the bad guys from the perspective of the setting. You could set up all kinds of fun and really subversive kind of scenarios with this.
Awesome.
Swords of Wuxia is your next upcoming release.
Correct.
So you're heading to the east. Can you give a little bit of inspiration for that and some more info on when it's coming out and what players can expect?
Sure. This is actually a redo of another book that I did, The Golden Scroll of Justice, which came out several years ago. In addition to being a fan of Lovecraft, I'm also a big fan of kung fu movies.
Sure.
And especially the ones that indulge in fantasy, where you have the Journey to the West.
Sure.
Again, a couple of those movies. And I never liked the idea that the monk was kind of stuck into the regular D&D books, because I know the reason they did it was because of the TV show Kung Fu, and the guy wanted to play that character. But it never really gelled for me. So I wanted to have something where that would be a natural, a natural fit. So basically, the new book, The Swords of Wuxia, it really came about because I'm removing the open game license from all my books.
Sure. Okay.
And in the process, I don't want to just slap a new cover on it and send it out into the world. I have to tinker. So there's a third entirely new material. There's a third of heavily edited material, and about a third of the old book is pretty much as it was.
Okay.
And it is there's new classes, new races, all of which are based on Chinese mythology, Chinese folklore. There's the Kung Fu system, which works the same way as the skill system in Adventures Dark and Deep. You pay experience points to learn certain skills. So that means that any class can learn Kung Fu as long as you're willing to pay the XP. And that sets up that kind of dynamic of, do I want to go up a level or do I want to get another level in my Kung Fu skill? So you have to be making those decisions. But it also opens things up, so you can have a magic user who knows Kung Fu or a thief or whatever. It's not just monks are the only people who know Kung Fu or martial artists or whatever.
Gives you those choices.
Exactly, and I wanted to have that variety throughout the book.
All right, so what conventions do you have coming up?
Well, I'm going to be at North Texas RPG Con. That's coming up in about a month.
Awesome.
I will be at ShireCon up in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I love Shire. It's a little tiny convention, but it is so awesome. And it's in like the most beautiful part of the world.
That's one I really want to go to because it seems to have like an OSR focus.
Right, it does.
Yeah.
It's got a very much of an OSR vibe, but there's a lot of other games that get played there. But and it's in a one room theater, and I think they're doing it for 2 days this time.
Cool. Yeah, that's on my radar as a con I want to get to.
I definitely recommend it.
Great. And where can people find you online?
Well, we two places. I'm on GreyhawkGrognard.com. That's where you can find all the stuff about the world of Greyhawk specifically. And there's a ton of free downloads of Greyhawk material. There's free modules. There's a whole 900 pages worth of 5th edition Greyhawk stuff.
Wow.
There's a ton of stuff on there. And there's also BRWGames.com, which is where you can get to Adventures Dark and Deep and all the books we've been talking about. And in addition to a whole bunch of adventures and the Castle of Mad Archmage and all that stuff.
I'm predicting that for the 50th anniversary coming up, there will be some Greyhawk something or other.
Hopeful.
That Wizards will put out. What are you thinking?
Honestly, I don't think so, because I think my impression is that they think Greyhawk is too similar to Forgotten Realms, and they don't want two medieval fantasy generic settings competing with each other. Personally, I would love it if they opened up Greyhawk to the DM's Guild.
Yeah.
They don't have to put anything out. Let us put the stuff out.
That's a good call.
But like I say, I think their thinking is it would be too closely aligned.
Sure.
So.
Well, Joseph, great to have you. If you keep putting out Orange Spine books, I will keep buying them.
That is the plan. Yes,
Excellent.
more Orange Spine books are coming.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So here at every edition, we try to highlight as many independent writers and creators as we can because we love the tabletop hobby. And I'm curious to know, who is your favorite creator? It may not be like a small independent company, but I really like Kobold Press.
Yeah.
I've loved them for a while. So since they were a small independent, John, how about you?
My favorite indie creator is definitely Night Owl Publishing. I love Meatlandia and the old school and cool zines and the latest Aquatic Adventures book. I think they're killing it for old school essentials. And so Night Owl Publishing, I'm going to plug them any chance I can.
Let us know down in the comments who your favorite indie publisher is, or you could leave us a line over at everyeditionrpg@gmail.com. You can also find all of our socials and the podcast and everything like that over at everyeditionrpg.com, where we have links to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, merch, Patreon, everything you could possibly imagine.
Like, follow, subscribe, and thank you.
It's time to loot the body. On today's Loot the Body, we are taking a look at Swords and Chaos from Blackspire Fantasy. John, what is going on with this book?
Well, so this was a recent Kickstarter that delivered.
Nice.
Still waiting. Kickstarters, sometimes they take their time.
My latest Kickstarter that just came in took 2 years to get in.
So this one actually turned around in pretty decent time. But Swords and Chaos, put out, like you said, by Blackspire Fantasy. This is a Castles and Crusades game. So if you love Castles and Crusades, a variant of Dungeons and Dragons, then this is sort of a no-brainer for you, because this is the low fantasy Conan version of Castles and Crusades.
Sure.
All right. And so this is going to be, monsters and magic are rare, are not something that you're going to run into very often. Most of the bad guys are guys.
Are people?
Yeah, right? Are people. And not necessarily monsters. The big bad might be a monster or something like that.
In charge of everything.
But you're going to be fighting minions that are going to be, cultists and, and just robbers and that sort of thing. Very much inspired by the works of Robert E. Howard and all the Conan stuff. So the basic idea here is to take Castles and Crusades, take the siege engine, which is the idea that you have your ability scores, and 2 of those ability scores are your primary ability scores, your prime scores. And you don't have skills per se. Instead, everything is an ability check. And if it's your prime attribute, you're just trying to beat a 12. So chances are you're going to succeed, right? But if it's not a prime attribute, if it's one of the other 4 of your attributes, then you're trying to beat an 18. That's tough. But that's the core of the siege engine. That's the simplicity of the game and why people gravitate towards Castles and Crusades, which is, like I said, a stripped-down, simpler version of 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons, essentially. So what this game does is it adds some elements of Dungeon Crawl Classics and some lessons learned from the OSR, and adds them and spices up Castles and Crusades a little bit. Nice. So it adds, soul, what it calls soul burning, but in Dungeon Crawl Classics that would be called spell burning. The idea that you could spend your attributes and to add to your dice rolls. It also adds an additional attribute of luck, just like Dungeon Crawl Classics. It has an interesting spell system, where essentially it's not that you have spell slots, it's that you have space in your brain. You have memory space that's worth a certain number of points.
Okay.
And rather than spells having levels, they basically have how much space they take up.
Sure.
Right? Which it's, 1 for 1 almost for spell levels and stuff. But if you have, space for, 2 units, then you could take the equivalent of 2 first-level spells, or you could take 1 second-level spell.
Okay.
Effectively. So that's the way the spell system works. It's basically Vancian, but a little bit of a tweak there. Most of the character classes, as you would expect, are not magic using, right? Because magic is rare. There is a sorcerer class. But again, it seems like it almost did that just because I felt like it had to, and it doesn't really lend itself to spellcasters are not going to be trusted. A lot of times they're the bad guys in this kind of setting. And if I were going to play this game, I wouldn't want any of the player characters to be magic users, because that is, so I like having then magic be the bad guy. Almost,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's corrupting. It's not a natural force. It's a supernatural force. So the book does have a loose setting. It's going to have familiar names like Hyperborea and Atlantis and stuff like that. So again, pulling from that, Robert E. Howard, Conan type stuff. So it's a very loose setting. It's essentially generic.
Sure.
And that's it. Like that's what to say about this game. I think ultimately it's a great supplement if you already play Castles and Crusades. I don't think it's a great game by itself. This is not gonna be anybody's choice in the competitive world of OSR games that are out there. This is not going to be anybody's choice over some of the other options that are out there.
Yeah, if you're coming from a different game.
If you're coming from a different game. But if you already play Castles and Crusades, it's an absolute no-brainer to pick up this book and to expand the options of your Castles and Crusades game. So rather than thinking about this as its own system, which it is, I just think about it as an options book, supplement book for Castles and Crusades, and then I like it. But it's a crowded field out there. If you're not already playing Castles and Crusades, Swords and Chaos is not going to do it. He's not going to win the race. It's no Shadow Dark, folks.
I want to give another thanks to MepaCon for allowing us this space to try our first shot at in-person interviews and recording in a different space.
Yeah.
This has been a wild time, really fun. And thank you to Katie and Ed and Joseph for allowing us to interview you. We learned a lot about the history of MepaCon and Greyhawk Grognard's sort of journey from blog to vlog to writing 900 pages and having like free stuff for Greyhawk. He is the Greyhawk guy.
Oh, yeah.
It's fantastic.
He's more Greyhawk than Greyhawk.
Yeah. He's at this point has to have more content than there exists ever.
Probably,
of
yeah.
regular sort of Greyhawk stuff.
He has a great new episode that covers the best Greyhawk novels.
Okay.
So if you want to read, a fantasy book that's set in Greyhawk, he's got a good top list of which ones to check out. So,
and of course, we appreciate you all for watching and listening and sticking with us for over a year now. And hopefully, we can be maybe not physically here for the next MepaCon, but who knows? And eventually at other cons as well.
Have camera, we'll travel. We'll be there. Laptops and cameras and mics are pretty easy to throw in a box and show up at a con.
Yeah. I think maybe at like bigger cons, I'd like to do some sort of like on the spot 5-10 minute sort of lapel mic type interviews with, other names in the indie industry and tabletop industry whenever they can get time.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're at some more cons and making more content and keep with us. Coming up, we've got an interview with Wet Ink Games. Mm-hmm. That's going to be our next episode. So looking forward to that and learning more about the role-playing game Never Going Home. And we'll see you then.